Tonight, I saw a woman crying on the side of the highway, and it changed the way I see every man I know. This isn't a headline. It happened right here in Ohio. On a night so cold the sky felt made of tin. Her car was half on the shoulder. Hazard lights flashing like a weak pulse. A plastic panel dragging along the asphalt. She knelt in the gravel with a flashlight between her teeth. A screwdriver in her hand that looked way too small for what she was up against. I pulled over without thinking. When I asked if she needed help, she tried to say no. I tried to wave me off, but her voice broke first. Then came the sentence that stuck with me all the way home. I thought I could handle everything on my own. But tonight, I can't. It hit harder than the wind cutting through my jacket. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. There, under the buzzing lights and the roar of passing trucks, was a person who had run out of strength. I grabbed my tool roll, lay down on the cold pavement, and got to work. The bolts fought me like they always do. But while my hands worked, my head kept replaying her words. I thought about how many people, not just women, carry that same story, the one about being completely independent, needing no one, until life snaps a bolt too tight and forces them to admit otherwise. We got the panel loose and checked the wheel. Good enough to get her off the highway. I followed her to the next gas station because that's what you do when you've started something that matters. Inside, the coffee tasted like cardboard, but felt like grace. She sat across from me, in hands around the cup like she was trying to borrow its warmth. And she talked. About long weeks, quiet weekends, the strange weight of doing everything alone. I didn't have advice for her that night. What I had was presence, a little patience, and a pair of hands that could turn the stubborn things. And that, it turns out, was enough. Listen, if you're a man in your 40s or 50s, and you've ever wondered if what you do still matters, stay with me. Because this story isn't just about one woman and one broken car. It's about us, the quiet, ordinary men who keep the world from breaking a little bit more each day. This story reminded me why the work we do, the way we show up, still counts. And why we can't let anyone tell us we're not needed. So stay here. I'm going to tell you the rest. By the time we're done, you'll know exactly why I pulled over that night and why you should too. I've worked with my hands most of my life. Not because I couldn't do anything else, but because there is a peace in bringing order to something small and stubborn. A door that won't close. A faucet that won't stop. A boiler that only respects you when you respect it first. At the high school where I'm head of maintenance, the building breathes. You can hear it at 5 a.m. when the lights flicker on and the vents cough awake. On game nights, I paint the foul lines on the gym floor and make sure the bleachers behave. I'm there when the team buses roll back in the rain. I keep a drawer full of screws that don't belong to anything anymore and a notebook with every model number we've ever hated. My wife, Amanda, calls it my monastery. She's not wrong. Work can be prayer when you do it honest. You lay hands on the world and ask it to heal a little. When our boys were small, Saturdays were for outfield grass and orange slices. I taught them the boring things. How to carry groceries so the bag doesn't cut your fingers. How to tie down a tarp so wind has nothing to grab. How to listen more than you speak when someone is hurting. The internet hates those lessons. I'm told. They don't trend. They don't sparkle. They just build a life that doesn't fall apart at the first squeal of metal. I've met men who believe their time passed the moment the world got wireless. They say there's no place for them anymore. That everything is apps and deliveries, and nobody needs a neighbor with a socket set. I don't buy it. The lights still go out. Pipes still burst in February. Babies still wake at 3. Someone still has to drive a tired wife to urgent care and sit there with her while the snow makes up its mind. The older I get, the more I notice how many systems depend on people you never see. Water, heat, the grid. We argue about everything at breakfast. But every night we sleep under roofs that someone framed and shingles that someone nailed. We live inside the labor of strangers. That isn't political. It's ordinary, Grace. A few years back, one of the young teachers said to me in the lounge, "I don't need a man. I'm doing fine." She wasn't mean. She was proud. She had every right to be. I nodded and told her I was glad for her. Then the winter storm came, and the parking lot turned to polished glass. She called me from the curb after dark. Her car wouldn't start. Her battery didn't hold a charge anymore. I gave her a jump. And then a ride home after the alternator laughed at both of us. She cried a little. Then apologized for crying. Then told me she hates asking for help. I told her I hate it too. We shook hands at her building and said nothing more than good night. You can love independence and still be human. You can be strong and still need people. You can be brave and still be cold on the side of the road with a screwdriver that's too small. None of that cancels any of the rest. When I met Linda on I-71, I saw years in her face. The good kind and the heavy kind. I saw the cost of long weeks and silent living rooms. I saw a woman who used to think the world would never ask her to kneel in wet grass and fight with a piece of plastic in November. And then, of course, the world asked. The world always asks. And never at a good time. We stood under the buzzing light at the gas station. She cupped the coffee with both hands. The warmth crawled back into her fingers. Slow as a cat. Do you have a family? She asked. I do. I said. How long? She asked. Long enough to know that love looks like 1,000 small repairs. I said. And I meant it. I'm not trying to win an argument with anybody. I'm telling you what I've seen. Good men exist. They don't announce themselves. They just show up again tomorrow. They remember which breaker feeds the basement lights. They fix the toilet at church without sending an invoice. They shovel the neighbor's walk when the neighbor's back is bad. No one writes headlines about that. But ask the neighbor how much it mattered when he didn't fall. If you're a man listening to this, late 40s, early 50s, and you've started to believe your usefulness expired somewhere around your last birthday, hear me plain. It didn't. It doubled. Because people forget faster now. Because there are more screens than hands. Because a quiet life is still a strong life. And someone has to prove it in public. Linda talked while the coffee cooled. She had a marriage once. And then she didn't. 2 good years. 3 hard ones. 2. Where they lived like polite roommates. And then a judge with a calendar finished the job. After the papers, she promised herself she would take back her time. She flew to Denver just because she could. She bought plants she forgot to water. She learned to eat dinner with a show on so the apartment didn't echo. She told herself she was fine. Most days it was true. Some nights it was not. She said, I used to scroll past men who looked average. Average how? I asked. Average like kind. She said, and laughed at herself. Like decent. Like steady. Like a guy with a normal job who would text good morning and mean it. I told myself I'd be bored. I told myself there would always be time later. I did not notice I was running out of later. There are 100 reasons people stay single. Some are good. Some are holy. Some are pure luck and timing. I don't pretend to know which one belongs to which person. But I do know this: the market makes promises it never intends to honor. It tells you there's another bus in 10 minutes when the schedule stopped last year. It sells tomorrow like a subscription. It forgets that bodies age and hearts change, and quiet gets loud if you let it. Online. People talk like men are optional add-ons. Offline. The pipes still burst, and the driveways still drift shut, and somebody still has to hold the ladder while you clear the gutter because a ladder is a liar and will not hold still for anyone. That doesn't make men better. It makes them necessary in the same way women are necessary for 100 other things the internet laughs at until it needs them. Babies are born into rooms with nurses. Not hashtags. Kindness happens in kitchens. Not comments. I'm not saying go back to 1955. I'm saying, know the price tag on your story. If you trade every ordinary intimacy for a collection of stamp-sized thrills, you'll wake up one day and realize you own a drawer full of ticket stubs and no one to nudge in the dark when the band plays your song. Linda told me about a Labor Day weekend in Phoenix when the AC died and the heat came in waves. She lasted 3 hours. Then called a service number. A man showed up with a meter and a way of standing that said he had lost fights with machines before and kept showing up anyway. He fixed it in 20 minutes. She tipped him with gratitude she hadn't felt in a long time. And for a week afterward, she considered what it would mean to have someone like that in her life on purpose. Then work got loud again. Monday came with its freight. The thought drifted away. I don't want to be someone's project. She said. No one does. I said. But sometimes letting someone help isn't turning yourself into a project. Sometimes it's letting them be human the way you want to be human. Sometimes it's how you both stay warm. She looked at me like the words were a window, and she could almost see through. Do you ever feel invisible? She asked. I do. I said. At work. When things only get noticed if they fail. At home. When I'm the least interesting thing in a room lit by screens. But that's not the same as being unnecessary. A good roof is invisible on purpose. She smiled at that. We finished the coffee. The clerk wiped the counter with the same square of towel he'd used all night. Two teenagers argued about music by the nacho machine. The world kept being the world. When we stepped back outside, the wind had settled into something almost kind. I checked the wheel again. I liked what I saw. You're good to go. I said. She nodded. And then the nod became a shake. And then the shake flooded into tears she tried to hide. I'm embarrassed. She said. I'm 53, and all I can think about is how much I want someone to hold my hand on a night like this. I could have made a joke. I didn't. I could have turned it into a lesson. I didn't. I handed her a clean shop towel from the truck and let the silence sit with us. Silence can be a friend if you don't make it feel unwelcome. This doesn't make you weak. I said. It makes you accurate. Humans are a team sport. She laughed once through her nose. Then she straightened like someone remembering how to stand. Thank you for stopping, she said. People drove by. I kept thinking someone will pull over. Then I started telling myself I didn't need them to. Then I started hoping again. Then you did. I told her the truth. I don't always stop. Sometimes the shoulder is too skinny. Sometimes the kids are in the back. Sometimes the gut says keep moving. Tonight the gut said pull over. I listened. It's not hero work. It's neighbor work. Heroes get statues. Neighbors get phone numbers. Garage codes. And a fridge shelf that knows their name. She asked if I could follow her for a few exits. I said I would. The highway felt smaller with purpose. I've always believed roads prefer company. 3 exits down. Her blinker announced the turn before her voice did. We slid into a quiet strip mall. The kind where a hardware store naps between a dry cleaner and a barber that only knows one haircut. She parked and got out like the ground might argue with her feet. I need to tell you something, she said. You don't owe me anything. I said. I know, she said. That's why I want to say it. I used to treat decent men like waiting rooms. I sat in them until something more exciting came along. I told myself I was choosing freedom. Maybe I was choosing noise. Maybe I was choosing later. Tonight I ran out of later. The words rang clean in the cold. I've heard versions of them from men too. From buddies who traded faithful women for a ghost with better angles. From coworkers who let poker nights eat the hours that could have fed a home. Regret is a unisex language. It sounds the same in every mouth. I'm not asking you for anything, she said. I just needed to tell someone who wouldn't turn it into a thread online. You told the right person. I said. I don't even have Facebook. My wife keeps me on a short leash. It's made of common sense. She laughed for real then. Relief looks good on people. It adds color back to their face. Her phone buzzed. A sister. Checking in. She said she was fine. She said she would be home in 20. She said thank you to a voice I couldn't hear. Then she tucked the phone away like it had done its job and earned a rest. Do you ever feel like we built a country that confuses attention with care? She asked. All the time. I said. Attention shouts. Care whispers. They don't sound alike. We stood there between 2 cars and the soft clank of a delivery truck unloading milk. I told her a story about the night our youngest got a fever that scared the sleep out of both of us. Amanda held him. I held the steering wheel, and the road between our house and urgent care. The nurse took him and took our fear, and traded both for medicine and a sticker that said he was brave. No one liked that story online. It didn't have a villain. It didn't have a twist. Just a family being ordinary on purpose. She looked at me like she was memorizing the outline for later. I used to think ordinary was the enemy, she said. Then my apartment got too quiet. I started talking to the kettle. Maybe you need a crowd. I said. Not a stadium. Just a crowd small enough to know when you're missing. My sister keeps inviting me to church, she said. Not for the sermons. For the casseroles. For the women who bring them. For the men who carry the tables. I've carried a lot of tables. I said, I recommend it. Tables remind you how heavy shared things can be. She took a long breath that traveled all the way down. Thank you for treating me like a person and not a punchline. She said, I'm a man in his 50s. I said, I've been the punchline too. It didn't fix anything. We exchange numbers because the world is still the world, and you can't be too careful. Text me when you get home. I said, so I know the story ends where it should. She nodded. Then she did something that surprised both of us. She stepped forward and hugged me with the awkward fierceness of someone who isn't sure about hugs anymore but knows this one belongs. It lasted exactly as long as it needed to, and not a second more. Then it was done. We both looked at our shoes like they had something to add. Go, I said, smiling. Before I start charging by the hour. She laughed, got in, and pulled away smoother than I expected. Tail lights are small, but they carry a lot of hope. On the drive home, the truck felt warmer. I thought about my father's hands and the way they looked bigger when they were gentle. I thought about my sons and how they watch me when I don't know they're watching. I thought about how 1,000 small choices grow into a roof that doesn't leak. The phone chimed when I turned onto our street. A text. Home. Thank you. For everything. For not making me feel stupid. I didn't answer right away. I let the gratitude sit like a good song in an old truck. Inside, the house smelled like laundry and tomato sauce. Amanda looked up from the sink and raised an eyebrow that asked every question at once. Flat tire, I said. Woman needed a hand. Of course she did, she said, and kissed my cheek like a signature on a familiar form. I stood in the doorway to the boys' room for a minute longer than usual. They're not boys anymore. Not really. One shaves now. The other will soon. I watched them sleep and felt that quiet ache fathers feel when they remember every version of a child at once. I am not a hero. I am a man who carries jumper cables and believes in showing up. I am a husband who tries to be boring in all the right ways. I am a neighbor who knows the sound of his street at night. If you're like me, this is your permission slip. Keep the tools in the truck. Keep the promises you made to people who know your middle name. You are not obsolete. You are an answer, waiting for a question the world hasn't asked yet tonight. The next morning, I found the torn plastic shield in the truck bed. I set it by the garage wall like a trophy no one else would understand. Amanda laughed when she saw it. Another roadside souvenir. She said. Another reminder. I said. At school, Mr. Caldwell in science asked if I could look at a stubborn sink. I fixed it with a washer that cost less than a cup of coffee. He thanked me like I'd saved a semester. On my break, I checked my phone. A second text from Linda. I'm at my sister's tonight. We're making soup. You were right about crowds. I smiled and went back to the boiler room. As the warmest place in a building that doesn't always remember how to be warm. Standing there with my hands on the rail, I thought about the men I know who feel invisible. The ones who survived layoffs and the ones who didn't. The ones who measure their worth by the weight they can move, and the ones whose backs have started to vote against that plan. This is for you. You have nothing to apologize for when you do ordinary things well. You make Saturdays safe. You make Tuesday possible. You make rooms feel like rooms instead of storage units for people's bodies. Your jokes aren't always funny, but your timing is, you know when to show up, you know when to leave, you know when to say, hand me that, and make it sound like dignity. Don't listen to voices that confuse flaws with failure. You will fail. We all do. But you can fail toward each other. You can fix what you broke. Even if it takes 3 trips to the hardware store and a call to the friend who knows more than you do. Be proud without being loud. Wear your wedding ring like a tool that fits your hand. Love your kids with your calendar. Not just your mouth. Learn the names of the old men on your street and let them teach you how to sharpen a blade you thought was dead. Ask the boy bagging your groceries how his day is and mean it. If you pray, pray with your sleeves rolled. If you don't, carry water anyway. I think about Linda and the way her voice changed when help arrived. I think about how fast contempt melts when the bolt finally turns. I think about how many arguments would die of natural causes if someone simply said, "Do you need a hand?" and waited for the answer. Here is my modest proposal. Let's flood our neighborhoods with useful men. Men who carry the weight and don't keep score. Men who can say, "I'm sorry" and not lose an inch of height. Men who fix their tone first. Men who know the difference between attention and care. And choose care even when no one is filming. If you're young and listening, hear an old man's advice. Build a life where someone misses you on purpose. Don't barter every evening for a handful of novelty. Choose a person before you choose the trip. Trips end. People can make you breakfast. Also, breakfast is better when someone else is in the kitchen. If you're my age, keep your body honest. Lift things that make you breathe. Stretch the parts that complain. Keep your truck ready. Keep your heart ready. When the shoulder is narrow and the night is cold. Be the man who pulls over without a speech in his head. Do the work. Drive home. Kiss your wife. Sleep like a man who belonged to the day he just lived. I answered Linda's second text after lunch. Soup with a sister is better than coffee with a stranger. I wrote. She sent a picture of a simple table. 2 bowls. 4 hands. Steam rising like gratitude you can eat with a spoon. That night, I put the torn plastic in the trash. Then I took it back out and leaned it against the garage wall again. You don't keep trophies for other people. You keep them to remember who you are. Here's the end of the story. The kind you can keep in your pocket. On a cold night in Ohio, a woman who thought she didn't need anyone learned she did. A man who sometimes felt invisible remembered he wasn't. Nothing went viral. No one got famous. But a car ran. A person got home. And somewhere between those 2 events, 2 grown-ups remembered what we forget too easily. If you're a man in your late 40s or 50s, they'll be proud. Not the kind of proud that puffs up. The kind that keeps promises. The kind that builds a table and carries it into a room and sets it down where it belongs. Someone will eat there. Someone will be less lonely because you did. That's enough. It always was.